back in session. You may be seated.
All right, so that we're all clear on the record, what we're going to do is, as soon as the jury is finished with their placing their order, are they ready?
We've already turned it.
I'm sorry.
We've already collected and turned
All
it.
right, then let's go ahead. We'll bring the jury in at this point, and we'll proceed with this. Hopefully, by that time that we finish with this section, we'll be at a point where we can break for let the jury eat, and then we can resume. Hopefully, after a 30-minute or so dinner break, and then we can do that. So I wanted to resume with the medical examiner. Is that sufficient time for everything to be done?
Yes, sir. Your Honor, I do want to, before the jury comes back.
Mr. Evans, you go right ahead. So.
I want to take an exhibit for identification purposes only.
Mr. Evans is tendering a copy of the unredacted transcript of the defendant's statement as an exhibit for the appellate record, and I have approved that, and if you'll hand that to the bailiff, he will present it, and we'll mark it filed as soon as the clerk returns from ordering supper. So.
Judge, and I'm moving a copy of the redacted transcript that the jury is following along with.
All right,
Also,
let me get the, so my records reflect that that would be Exhibit 211 would be the copy of the unredacted transcript, and then Exhibit 212 would be the copy of the redacted. And for the record, my understanding is that the District Attorney's Office has reviewed the audio and video portions of the remaining sections, and that there are no impermissible portions of that to be played, correct?
Judge, we reviewed the audio and video with the defense.
Both sides have reviewed it, and both sides agree that there's nothing in there, assuming there's not some, whatever, but both sides have reviewed what's left to be played, and there's nothing objectionable.
That's correct.
All right, then we are ready to bring the jury in. All right, looks like we have everyone back. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for ordering quickly, placing your order for dinner quickly, and we'll go ahead and get started again. And I would remind you of my instructions that I gave you earlier about not to consider that portion of the audio that you last heard right before we took our recess. So we're now ready to resume the playing of the defendant's statement. For the record, what page are we on at this section?
Page 85, Your Honor.
85. All right, thank you.
The detective was and I didn't have it then.
That last part, I couldn't do it. You kicked it under the seat. He would have never saw it. He would have never saw it, right? You kicked it under the seat, he wouldn't have seen it. Now, I'm not saying he wouldn't have found it eventually. There have been some consequences. But at some point during this, you decided to change the dynamics. The situation changed.
I heard the sheriff and the police going on and we still in there.
But he put it up, and the situation drastically declined because an officer that at one point felt strong enough to pull his gun on you and to give you some commands felt comfortable enough to tell you, it's okay, calm down, it's okay, just can you crawl out the passenger side? And he put his gun up.
And you had issues before too.
So you did know it.
I don't know him by name. I recognize his face.
And so
He,
you knew at what point, back to my two questions, that you decided to shoot him?
when he opened the passenger door.
He didn't open the passenger door.
But
That's
when the passenger door got opened,
it. He didn't open the passenger door. The passenger door never got opened. Didn't happen. Past that.
when he come around the passenger side of the car, I swear I still didn't have it in my hand.
He wasn't even facing you. He was looking across the street. So why? Because you had issues in the past and it was time to take care of it?
No, I mean, I wouldn't hold no grudge, no nothing like that. I don't know. I honestly don't know.
I don't.
I don't either.
I don't say
It's decent, man. I didn't intend on shooting him whenever he pulled up.
Okay, I agree with that.
Big gun
Maybe
out.
when he pulled up,
I didn't
but you
intend
made a decision, a conscious decision in this interaction with him to shoot him, and that's what I'm asking. When did that happen?
I'm saying like he really tripped me out when he pulled a gun on me and was yelling at me. Yeah, like I remember saying he's gonna kill me, he's gonna kill me, he's gonna kill me.
So when he pulled his gun out, is that when you made the decision to kill him?
I didn't even decide then to kill him. I was,
Okay,
I was
rephrase.
trying to decide to get, I was going to get away from him.
One way or the other? Is that what you're saying?
I didn't even think about the gun. I was like, I gotta get away, he's gonna kill me. I don't know.
I'm gonna have a hard time believing that statement.
I mean, for real.
Because here's what happens. Remember, I watched the video. I've seen it. You shoot him, and a man that you're so scared of that you think you have to shoot, you hunt down the road a little ways, you shoot him more, and then once you get close to him, the man you're so afraid of that is still breathing life.
He's not.
The video, I watched it. He's alive.
Well, if I walked up to him down there, he's not. No, he was not.
He was alive when you walked up to him. And a man you're so afraid of that's still alive that has a gun. He has a gun, and you're so afraid of him. You walk down the street to him. When you finish, you put him down. A man you're so afraid of that you think he's going to kill me. A man you're so afraid of that de-escalated the situation and asked a man who's so afraid of him if you're okay. So you weren't afraid out. I'm not saying you wasn't freaked out. I think you were freaked out because of a decision you made.
I had made, honest God, I had made a decision until he hit the passenger door. I don't
So
know.
when he got to the passenger door, that's when you decided.
I hadn't even thought about my gun until then. When he hit the passenger door,
Well, I got the answer to the question of when did you decide to shoot him?
when he walked up on the passenger door,
Okay, I got that answer.
he was going to shoot me.
What's the why?
Because I thought he was going to shoot me. Because of what he He pulled his pistol and yelled at me from the other side. He had me scared. I'm not gonna lie.
So scared that you hunted him down? So scared that a man who was still breathing life, that you decided to put the gun in your hand
I swear he was dead.
and execute him?
He was dead. I swear to God.
He wasn't dead.
I thought he was. I swear to God, I thought he was. When I walked up there and told him, he didn't look like he was breathing or moving. I really did that so he wouldn't be suffering.
Say that again, I didn't hear.
And I really only reason why I didn't, that was
Did what?
shot him those last 6 times just because I wanted to make sure he wasn't suffering. But I swore to God he was dead.
And he's going to suffer if he's what? Only he's going to suffer if he's what?
Only if he's alive, but like I said,
And you
he
wanted to
wasn't.
make sure he was what?
He wasn't breathing, and he wasn't moving, and he wasn't responsive to anything. I mean, he was dead.
What was he supposed to respond to?
I mean, he wasn't.
Being shot? He did. He screamed. Erica didn't. He screamed.
She tried.
You didn't.
She tried. She shot straight out. She was.
You didn't. A man you're so afraid of that you shot. You didn't shock out.
In fact, you were pretty calm.
It's not. I didn't have it planned. I swear.
So your why answer is because you thought he was going to kill you. And you were deathly afraid of him? Is that right? Stephen?
I was scared he was coming. I swear.
He escalated the situation. I tried to calm you down.
I don't. I know why he was ill.
What do you think should happen to somebody that done that to Sergeant Daniel Scott Baker?
Put me in a.
What do you think should happen?
I think I should be put down like a dirty dog. Because I never been hurt. I don't know why I done it. It's like I couldn't. I don't know, man. I never even thought about shooting him. I swear. It's.
You get the opportunity to sit in this room and talk to us.
I don't know where it even come from.
Well, you got clarity pretty quick.
It's.
Your mind cleared pretty quick because you went into survival mode of self-preservation.
Couldn't even.
Load him up, hide him, burn him to get rid of your fingerprints.
It's like I couldn't make myself stop. I don't know. Could just no.
No, you didn't. You didn't tell yourself no. You got on the radio and told people, I'm good.
No, one in custody.
No, you stay at the car. That's right. You did make a phone call, didn't you? Or got a phone call, didn't you? Yeah, you did. You answered his phone, didn't you? You can remember.
Steve.
And then you get down there at the car and you gotta get rid of what can locate that car. So you start trying to get GPS. And Stephen Wiggins is clear as a bell.
I swear, I really don't remember talking on the phone.
Well, you talked on the radio, didn't you?
I remember talking on the radio.
A few
But
times.
I swear, I don't remember talking on the phone. I don't. And I'm trying to think of the person. I am diagnosed schizophrenic. Swear to God, you need my records. I am diagnosed schizophrenic. Sometimes I really don't remember talking on the phone.
I'm a Scorpio, and I don't know that in the situation that you were in, that I could have been as clear as you were doing what you were doing. It took you about a split second to make a decision to run up to get his car and load him up and get him out of there. When you had the courage to get on the radio and play like you were him. But then you come in here and you expect me to believe that all of this stuff that you told me? You told me some truth today.
Honest to God, I don't.
I think I would respect you more if you'd have walked in here and said, "You're damn right I did it."
I mean, I admit I did it, but I don't.
And I don't care that I did it.
I didn't intend on doing it, I swear. And I took it, and
But I think you really have respect for somebody to come in here
I'm
and
sitting at creek
say that they give him.
for 3 days.
Samuel Scott Baker is dead,
When my pistol was up, I'm trying to pull the trigger.
and you want me to think about you sitting in a creek?
I was sitting with my pistol in my mouth. I was going for it.
We didn't want anybody else to get hurt.
Oh, what is
That includes you. We searched for 2 days to find you alive. That was our goal.
I've been trying to kill myself.
Stephen, man.
I don't know it. I swear. Every time I close my eyes, I've had nightmares.
Stephen, when the officer was walking around, what did you and Erica talk about? Let's go back to that, because, now listen to me, because there was something that was communicated, okay? Can you tell us what that was?
I told her that I was going to jail. She said she'd be there for me.
You told her what now?
I told her, I said, I love you, I'm sorry, baby, I'm going to jail.
Why did you say you were going to jail?
Because I know I got the right warrants on me.
Is that is that about the time he gets to the window?
Yeah. I told her, I mean, that's all, I swear to God, I told her, I said, baby, I'm going to jail, I love you.
And she said,
And she said, but you're what? I said, I'm going to jail, I love you. I said, she says, I'll be here for you.
Did you have a gun in your hand when you were saying that to her?
No.
Now be honest.
No, I didn't, I swear to God, I didn't. It was still under the seat.
Okay. So,
Hey, I don't,
so when you make that statement and she responds, is that when you get the gun?
no, I didn't even respond to, I don't know, it's like, whenever he's standing in the window, I didn't even. I just grabbed it and started shooting.
Okay, so
I mean, I didn't even tell myself, this is what you're gonna do. I just grabbed it and started doing it.
So, you had said earlier when we were talking that Erica actually came back. Why did she come back?
I don't know.
Well, what did you say to her?
I just screamed, get away from me. Leave. Get away from me.
And where were you at? Was this while you were loading Deputy Baker into his car? Is that when she came back?
I can't remember. I can't remember if I'd already pulled down there or not. Hold on. Let me think.
Okay. Well, thanks.
Take your time.
It might have been. I think I might have already pulled down there. Has anybody seen her? Heard from her?
Yeah, we've seen her.
You didn't arrest her, did you? I swear she didn't have nothing to do. She didn't even know who I'm going.
Well, you guys have been riding around. For you to tell me that Erica didn't know you had that gun, that's hard to believe. I mean, you have to at least acknowledge that part from where we're sitting.
She did.
You told she knows that. So for you to tell me that she didn't know you had that gun, that's hard to swallow. Tell me this. Where did you get the gun?
Off the streets. No. I had a phone ring. I've been in the woods. I've been in the streets.
I'll ask you a question, you tell me. Some people are kind of finicky like this. Anything that we didn't ask you about, you think we need to know about?
The reason why I've been packed up going to move out of state is because when y'all raided my house looking for me for warrants.
You're going to say that again, buddy. I'm sorry, man.
About a week ago or 2 weeks ago. I don't know, my days are running together now so much.
Don't worry about the days.
Just Dixon County went to my house on Yellow Creek Road looking for me. That's why everything was packed up and was leaving state. I was going to run out of state.
Where were you going to go?
I ain't really decided yet. Kentucky, Illinois, New Mexico, California, somewhere.
You got like a bank account or?
I got a
how do you get money on there? Stay with it. You still with it?
Friends, I can't, his friend,
Did your mama put money on there? She has? When's the last time she put money on there?
I don't even know. The day or two before this happened.
So she has to physically put money, I mean, she has to call in and put money on it? It's not like something that does it automatically, right? So she, I mean, how does she put money on it? I don't know how they work. I got a bank account that has a very low balance, so I don't understand the green dot card. I'm almost done. Sit up and talk to me just for a little bit more. So how does she put money on it? So she'd have to call in and give a reference number?
I think, I'm not sure, I ain't never loaded it, except for at Walmart, put money directly on it at Walmart.
So why, after this happened,
But I mean, she's been,
why would, after this happened, your mom put money on that card?
after what happened,
After you shot and killed her?
I haven't talked to her at all since then. I swear to God, I haven't
She
had a
put money
phone.
on your card?
I don't know if she has or not since then.
You don't know that?
No, I do not know that. I swear I've not been in contact with anybody since this has happened.
You don't know why she would put money on there after it happened?
I don't know if she has or not.
Why would, I mean, what would be your guess is why she put money on there after this happened?
She just hasn't heard from me, so she put her money on there to make sure it's okay.
Help you out?
I don't,
She know you was leaving town? I mean, it's your mama.
Yeah.
So she knew you were running?
Actually, she thinks I'm in Indiana.
So she already, when did you tell her you were going to Indiana?
I told her 2 days ago I was in Indiana. I don't. There is the only person that knows where I'm at because she's with me.
Alright.
And it's
Got any questions for me?
What am I being charged with?
Number one, first degree murder. You're gonna be looked in at the Dixon County Jail.
I really had planned on killing him. I don't know, it just all at once
Take
happened.
your drink here. Stand up for me.
Can I go poop?
You need your restroom when we get to the jail.
I haven't pooped in 4 days.
You think
I won't,
you got movement?
I won't do nothing stupid. Yeah, I'm gonna.
Well, we'll see about that before we get you
I
gone.
won't try nothing stupid. I'm not gonna fucked up. I don't take responsibility for what I did.
Well, we'll take these back off if you have to go to the restroom. Stand up, man.
But right now, we gotta put it back on.
Can they go in front? I'm hurting so bad.
Sorry.
I won't fight you.
Are you cooperative with me so far? For the most part? Just do what we ask you and nobody gonna mistreat you.
We got some
was just for him to change it as well.
Let's go ahead and do that. Put it up there.
Thank you.
Agent Neese, have just a few follow-up questions. Based on your review of the interview we've watched and your personal interview with the defendant and your observations of the defendant on the day he was arrested, I want to go back quickly to his clothing and backpack. What condition were they in?
They were wet.
And in this interview, did the defendant tell you anything about being in a creek?
Yes, he stated in the statement that he had been in a creek several days or a few days.
Okay. And does that explain why everything he had was wet?
That's correct.
What exactly did he say where he was hiding in this creek?
So he talked about that he had moved down the creek a little bit and that he had found a root ball of a tree that had blown over, and he was kind of hiding out in that root ball close to the creek.
All right. And I'm going to refer you to some of his answers in this interview.
Okay.
But do you, and we can go back to it or the transcript if you can't remember, but what did he tell you, the defendant, about the door and the use of pliers on the door?
That he had to use the pliers to open the door, that there were two rods, one to unlock and then one to open the door, and he had to use the pliers to open that door.
And was that the truth or a lie?
That's a lie.
And how do you know that?
Based off of the video evidence and the testing we did at the lab, that the door, the driver's door operated appropriately. It opened and closed, locked, and the door that was not operational was the back driver's passenger door.
Okay. How many times throughout this interview does he mention the use of these pliers?
Several.
Does he keep saying he was trying to use these pliers?
He does.
All right. Where does the defendant tell you that his weapon is when Sergeant Baker approaches the vehicle?
He says that he's kicked it under the seat a good ways, that he kicked it as hard as he could to get it under the seat.
And in your observation of the encounter on that day and as well as the defendant's interview, how much was Sergeant Baker yelling?
Minimal. He, again, when he started to do the felony interaction, he ordered Mr. Wiggins out of the vehicle, and then when that command was not followed, it intensified somewhat, but then quickly started to de-escalate to try to keep the situation at a calm level.
At some point, what does the defendant tell you about Sergeant Baker and the passenger side door?
That he can crawl out that door and that he can get out that side.
Okay. And what did the defendant say about deciding to shoot him when he opened the passenger door?
So he's saying that Sergeant Baker was opening the door and yanking his wife out of the car, which is not corroborated by the evidence on the body cam, and that he shoots him when he gets to the passenger door.
Specifically, I'll refer you to page 13, line 14 of the transcript to refresh your memory.
You said, what page again?
Page 13,
Okay.
line 14.
Yes, sir.
Just remind us again exactly what did the defendant say?
Mr. Wiggins states, and he walks around and he's like trying to yank my wife out. And I mean, I know she hasn't done nothing wrong.
Was Sergeant Baker trying to yank her out of the car?
No,
Did he open the passenger side door?
he did not.
Did he touch the passenger side door?
From what I can tell, but in the video it's hard to tell, but as far as I can tell, there was no interaction with the passenger door.
Was Sergeant Baker's pistol drawn when he approached the passenger side door?
No, he had already reholstered again when he was coming around the passenger side the second time in the body cam.
And in this interview with the defendant, does the defendant make a statement to you about removing Sergeant Baker's duty weapon once he loaded his body into the Patrol Unit 500?
That's correct.
Where does he say he found the duty weapon?
In Sergeant Baker's holster on his side.
It was in his holster.
It was.
Did you observe the defendant check Sergeant Baker's pulse?
I did not.
Did it appear in any way that the defendant rendered any type of first aid to Sergeant Baker?
It does not.
Did he do anything after firing the final round in his magazine, as far as first aid?
No, sir.
Could you hear Sergeant Baker's breathing in the body cam video?
I could.
And was he still breathing as he was on the ground?
Yes, you can hear the labored breathing, and then you hear Sergeant Baker moan when the final 3 shots are fired.
Okay. And then I would refer you to page 51 of the transcript. What did the defendant tell you on page 51, starting with line 14, about what he did when he approached Sergeant Baker?
Mr. Wiggins, once I realized there wasn't no saving him, I backed up. I think I was on his side, and I closed my eyes and pulled the trigger. I think it might have been twice. And then Agent Neese, why did you do that? Mr. Wiggins, I don't know. From that point on, I realized how bad he was. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like a dog. You don't let it suffer. You make sure, you know. I didn't want the man to suffer. Yet I checked his pulse and he didn't have one. But still, I didn't want him to be feeling anything, be hurting, just in case. I wouldn't want to lay there and suffer, would you?
Did he check his pulse?
He did not.
What did the defendant tell you about forensic evidence and his understanding of forensic evidence?
That he had watched shows, and that in this situation, his forensic evidence, his fingerprints, would be all over this vehicle.
And based on the evidence that you've seen presented in court, is that the case?
It is.
Was the defendant's DNA found on and around the crime scene?
His DNA, his fingerprints were found on evidence in this situation.
What did the defendant tell you about why he started the fires? And I'll refer you to page 37.
I'm sorry, what page?
37? Yeah, specifically line 21. Well, you can start with line 20 where you ask him or state that's all right.
Agent Neese, that's all right. Mr. Wiggins, I don't know. Maybe to get rid of everything. I don't know. Agent Neese, to get rid of everything like what? Mr. Wiggins, the vehicle and the body.
And what was the context of this exchange between yourself and the defendant?
So I was asking him again about the fire, why would you do that? And it was regarding the destruction of evidence so that his forensic evidence, fingerprints, DNA, could hopefully be destroyed by his setting of the fires.
Agent Neese, we're almost finished, but I have a couple more items of evidence that I'd like for you to identify.
Okay.
Can you identify this first one, please?
Yes, so this is what is called the known standard or blood spot for Sergeant Baker. It was collected at the ME's office, and that evidence has to dry for a certain period of time before I can collect it. And it looks like I obtained it from the ME's office on June the 8th, 2018 at 2:17 p.m.
Move that as the next exhibit, please.
Exhibit 211.
And
Actually, no, let me correct you. We had the unredacted transcript that while you were out of the room, I had them filed. We're marking that as Exhibit 211. The copy of the redacted transcript that the state submitted is Exhibit 212, so this would be 213. I'm sorry, I thought you had been advised. Thank you.
This BQ 13.
Thank you. And Agent Neese, can you identify this, please?
Yes, this is the buccal swabs. The buccal swab is just a swabbing of the inside of the mouth. So we do that so that we can get a known standard of DNA so that we have a comparison sample to compare to evidence that we find at scenes. And this is the known buccal swabs of Stephen Wiggins, and they were collected at just after the interview on June the 1st, 2018 at 5:25 p.m. And it has my evidence tape and my initials where I sealed it.
I'll move that as the next exhibit.
214.
Agent Neese, can you identify this, please?
Yes, so these are the, what we call the post-mortem finger impressions, which mean just after death, finger impressions of Sergeant Baker. They were collected at the ME's office, and I transferred them to the crime lab for analysis to other evidence in this case.
Thank you. Move that as the next exhibit.
215.
Agent Neese, please identify that.
So this is the actual physical body camera device that was collected on May the 30th, 2018 from the scene at Bear Creek Valley Road.
Thank you. I'll move that as the next exhibit.
216.
Agent Neese, when you interviewed the defendant, he admitted that he provided a false social security number. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What name did he tell you that he gave to Sergeant Baker at the traffic stop?
In his statement, he advised that he give the name of Scott Wiggins.
All right. And finally, I'll refer you to page 113 of your transcript. It's 113. What did the defendant say he was planning on doing as far as leaving or moving? Starting with line 19.
So Mr. Wiggins, Dixon County went to my house on Yellow Creek Road looking for me. That's why I'm leaving. While everything was packed up and was leaving the state, I was going to run out of state.
Thank you. I'll pass the witness.
Mr. Evans?
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
So Agent Neese, I will just want to run through a few things with you. I know you've been up there a little bit, so I'll try to get through this fairly quickly. So you were in the courtroom earlier and heard the testimony of Mr. Brian Hudnall, is that correct?
That's correct.
And based on your recollection and your investigation of the case, you were in fact contacted by Mr. Hudnall through a kiosk at the jail, is that right?
I wouldn't get that message. That message would go to the housing agency, so the jail that is responsible for his safekeeping. So it would go to them, and then they would contact me directly, not him directly.
Directly, not him directly to
Sure.
you. And isn't it true that your first contact from Brian Hudnall didn't occur until November 23rd, 2018, is that right?
I don't think I was present for the first interview.
I mean the first time he reached out to you on the kiosk, that first message that you received, and in fact dated November 23rd of 2018?
I think the kiosk date is November the, I'm sorry, 23rd? Is that correct?
November 23rd.
Yes, November the 23rd. I believe that's correct on the kiosk.
And he actually reached out a couple other times on the kiosk after agents met with him, is that right?
I do know that Agent Brant Holt, or former Agent Brant Holt, he's the gentleman in the video in the Tyvek suit, interviewed him at one point, Mr. Hudnall, and then myself and Agent Holt at the time interviewed him the second time.
Now, when we're talking about what happened at Tidwell Switch, you've made several references in your testimony as well as what Mr. Wiggins did about Erica Castro Miles being in the vehicle. Is that right? She was there?
She was.
And she was actually apprehended later that day. Is that correct?
That's correct. She was found approximately 1.5 miles hiding under a shed.
Okay. And then after she was found, was she subsequently arrested and charged in this case?
She was.
Now, the video that we just watched, the body cam footage.
Oh, yes, sir.
Now, you've talked a lot about your perceptions of what happened on the body camera. Is there any other camera footage other than that body camera footage that you viewed?
That's the only camera footage that was available.
So when you're describing events to the jury, your perceptions of the actions of either Mr. Wiggins or Sergeant Baker, you're doing that from the same vantage point that the jury has by viewing that same video. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Specifically, you were talking about just now. You were talking about when Sergeant Baker would have went to the passenger side of the vehicle, and there were some questions to you about whether his hands touched the door or hand touched the door, whether he may have had his pistol holstered or in the other hand, and you had a response to that. I think as to whether he touched the door, I think you said you weren't sure, you couldn't tell. Is that accurate?
That's accurate, because you can't see in the video whether his hand's out or if it's extended to the door or touching the door or a few inches from the door. It's just, you just can't see that hand.
And so it's literally not by the vantage point of the body camera, which would have been placed on his chest. It's not possible to determine how close he would have actually gotten to the passenger door. Is that fair?
Well, you just can't see it in the video, but I don't think the body camera was worn up here just based on the vantage point.
Okay, where do you think is this specifically?
Approximately looks like he's wearing it on his belt, because you can hear the movement of the belt when he walks.
Oh, so on his belt, it would have been lower. It wouldn't have been like chest level. It would have been like duty belt level.
It could have been. It seems to be lower than normal up on the upper chest.
I see.
Yes.
And there were some questions then about when Mr. Wiggins approaches Sergeant Baker's body in the body cam, on the body cam,
Yes, sir.
after the last 3 shots.
Yes, sir.
And I believe there was an exhibit that was put forward with a demonstrative that you'd put forward where it was showing the high point in a lock back position.
Yes, sir.
Where would Mr. Wiggins' hands have been when in that picture, when it's showing the high point in the lock back position?
He's above Sergeant Baker. As Sergeant Baker's laying on the ground, he's above him.
Or when his hands are like that and down in that picture, are his hands anywhere near his body, his torso?
I'd say they were close.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
If not on them, right? If not literally on his body.
It doesn't look to be touching his chest, but it looks like his hands are elevated but close to Sergeant Baker's body.
But from the vantage point of the video, obviously it shows what it shows, but you can't tell definitively whether or not Mr. Wiggins actually touched Sergeant Baker's chest with the gun in his hand.
From that vantage point, it doesn't appear to me that he touches his chest. It doesn't appear that he gives chest compressions that he says, because chest compressions are hard. They would make movement, and in this interaction, it just seems that there's some shuffling around, and that's it.
And regardless of chest compressions, when Mr. Wiggins was in the interview, and you actually had him demonstrate how he would have, when you said, how did you put your hands on his chest, or how did you do the compressions? Do you recall how Mr. Wiggins actually put his hands?
He mentioned that he would have still had his gun in his hand, and that he kind of did this motion, like crossing his hands.
With like he actually had a gun in his hand.
Right,
He was
exactly.
Pushing down, okay. Now, there was a couple, 2 days, is it, how many hours is it from your recollection, from the time of the shooting at Tidwell Switch, when Officer Baker is killed, to the time when the state troopers actually come across Mr. Wiggins on the side of Stinson?
So you're talking approximately, you have May the 30th of 2018, after the 6 o'clock hour in the morning, until June the 1st, at the approximately, because he gets to the ER at approximately 7:58 in the morning. So that would be the time frame from May the 30th in the, say, 6:30 time frame to June the 1st at about the 7:58, 8 o'clock time frame.
And by all accounts, he's hiding in a creek, just off of Stinson Road for that period of time. Is that correct?
He's in that general area, in that radius that we talked about.
And I think that when he's presented to the ER, he's like pruned fingers, wet.
Yes.
Presume some mild hypothermia, if I recall correctly.
From the doctor's testimony, yes.
Right. And you were present when the ER doctor testified earlier, correct?
I was, yes,
okay.
sir.
And do you recall the ER doctor's record saying that he would have been admitted at approximately 8:07 a.m.?
I know that there's some times on those records that are a little different. There's some that say 7:58. Admit date and time was June the 1st, 2018 at 7:58. And then I do believe there were other times listed on there as well.
But approximately somewhere between 7:55, 8:05, 8:07, 8:10, something like that,
Sure.
around the 8 o'clock hour
Yes,
that
sir.
morning. And he was discharged from the ER later that same day at 2:44 p.m., correct?
About that time, yes, sir.
And if I recall correctly, the start time on your interview with Mr. Wiggins, which took place at the ER, began at 2:55 p.m. Is that
So the leader that I did, as far as denoting who's in the room, where we're at, what the date and time is, was 2:55 p.m. But you could see from the video that there was some downtime between the time that I did the leader and that Mr. Wiggins is brought to the conference room where we were at. I assume he was coming from getting discharged at that part of the ER and was walked over to the conference room.
Right. And he's even still in a pair of scrubs that he would have been wearing while he was admitted to the hospital because his clothes were wet, correct?
Correct. Well, his clothes had been, they are wet, but they had been collected as evidence, and so he was given scrubs so that he could leave the ER in some kind of attire.
Did you observe Mr. Wiggins while he was actually during his admission times between 8:07 and 2:44?
Intermittently, I mean, I was at the hospital, I was in and out, close to his room. I didn't stay there the entire time, but I was in the hospital for the most part of that, his treatment.
One moment here. Those are my questions. Thank you, Agent Neese.
Just brief minute. Agent Neese,
Yes.
just to follow up back with the hands near Sergeant Baker, let's be real clear. You've interviewed the defendant and we've all watched body cam here today.
That's correct.
Are any additional shots fired after you see the defendant approach Sergeant Baker, when you actually see him on video?
No, there are no more shots fired once you see his face.
He's already fired all the shots.
That's correct.
So in the interview with you, does he say that he checks his pulse, gives chest compressions, backs up, and then fires 2 rounds?
That's correct.
Is that true?
It's not.
We know he's already fired all the rounds in his magazine.
That's correct.
Now, I want to turn your attention to page 56 of the transcript. starting with line 4.
Agent Neese, I mean, you said you were former fire and rescue. Mr. Wiggins, yeah, of course I had the gun in my hands, so I just slid it across and pushed. Agent Neese, how many times? Mr. Wiggins, anywhere from 5 to 10. I think it was 8 to be exact, because you're supposed to push 8. But it wasn't. Like I said, every time I pushed, some more blood. Agent Neese, did you push on his chest before or after the 2 rounds? Mr. Wiggins, before. Before I backed up, I walked over to him and pushed, and he didn't. Like I said, it was nothing but pouring more blood out of him. And I touched his neck, and there wasn't no heartbeat, and there wasn't no breath at all.
So, Agent Neese, from the best of your observations, did that happen?
That's not true.
I'll pass the witness.
Recross.
Agent Neese, at some point in your direct testimony, if I recall, it was your recollection, and again, chest compressions aside, that from your vantage point on the video, that Mr. Wiggins, when he, in that same photograph where the gun and his hands are down, that you were noted that Sergeant Baker's body was moved, or the body was moving.
Yes, sir.
So earlier when we were talking, you were saying, I don't think he was touching him, but he would have been touching him if the body was moving at that point, correct?
I don't believe he was touching his chest.
Oh, I see. Okay.
This is a still frame. It's a stop in the time of this video. And I believe at that time it's when Mr. Wiggins is taking the keys out of Sergeant Daniel Baker's pockets.
And so that's, when you're seeing his hands down there, you think that's him actually grabbing the keys?
I think he's starting to manipulate to start to remove things from Sergeant Baker's person.
Okay. And did you have is there any glimpse of the keys or anything like that you were able to note from the video at that point in time?
No, I based the keys on my training, knowledge, and experience as a deputy sheriff, as a municipality police officer. As you've seen in the backpack from the video or the photograph that was entered earlier, you had a set of keys with a string and a ball on the end of it, and it had some other keys in the athletic club key card. Those are keys in my experience. Then you saw the single key that had the same number. In my experience, what I would do as a patrolman is I would have that single key, silver key in the ignition of my patrol vehicle and have the other keys in my pocket so that when I have an encounter, I can either leave my vehicle running or I can lock it and still get back into it and have a quick access to a key that's already in the ignition in case there's a fleeing suspect or anything like that. You can quickly pull that key out of your pocket off the string, unlock the door, jump in, and the vehicle's either started or you can start it quickly.
And so that's why there would have been 2 keys. Right?
That's my perception of that, because I worked patrol for some years and I did the very same thing. I had a patrol set of keys in my pocket, and then there was a key in the ignition.
But just to be clear, from your perspective of that video, from your vantage point, there's no indication of Mr. Wiggins checking his pulse, correct?
I cannot see him check his pulse.
There's no indication of him
No, sir.
giving any kind of compressions or anything like that?
No, sir.
Thank you.
All right, there are 2 questions that I've been handed, so ladies and gentlemen, you kind of know the drill. If you'll step across the hallway, let me address this on the record, and we'll probably deal with those 2 before we have our dinner, unless the dinner's already here. Y'all go ahead and eat, and we'll deal with it after we eat, okay?
Thank you.
We're just going to leave you on the stand for the rest of the night. So.
Yes, sir.
two questions I've been handed are the following. During the interview, did Special Agent Neese ever observe any actual tears from Mr. Wiggins? And the second one was, how much paper, it's in quotation marks, how much paper are you on? That was a question asked by Agent Neese in the interview. And the question the juror asked is, what does that question mean? We'll start with the last question first. Any objection to asking the witness that question?
Well, Judge, that's a compound answer. Because he can explain what paper means, but it's an untruthful answer. It's a statement that the defendant said he wasn't on paper for 18 years. So sure, he can ask me.
I'm of the opinion that's probably not an appropriate, I think it calls too much attention to the issue of warrants or, outstanding things. I think under those circumstances that one we should probably exclude. Anyone want to be heard on the question of what did he observe about tears?
I think I'd like to know the answer first.
Agent Neese, did you actually observe any actual tears from Mr. Wiggins during the interview?
I did not.
I don't think we should ask a question.
Let me ask this question. If he had said yes, that I saw buckets of tears, would you have said yes, go ahead and answer the question? We're going to allow that question to be asked, only because it's not clear from the jurors can observe what they want to observe, but it's not clear from the video that you can see one way or the other. There's a great deal of crying and sobbing by Mr. Wiggins during that, and I think it's a legitimate question. It's a question I had. I wasn't able to see. There were some marks on the table that appear it could have been something, but it may have been fingerprints. So under that, I think since Agent Neese was sitting across the table, that's a legitimate question. When we return from our dinner break, we will allow that question to be asked, and then we'll terminate Mr. Neese. All right. Not terminate Mr. Neese, but terminate him as a witness. Hey, it's 6 o'clock. Let's be honest, I'm a little bit frazzled. So. All right, we're going to break. Anything I need to do before we go? How long do you all need before when's your next witness going to be here? Do you want to take 30 minutes or do you want to take longer? The jury's food is here, so I think we'll probably be ready in 30 minutes.
30 minutes is fine.
30 minutes.
All right, 30 minutes it is. We'll have a 30-minute dinner break and then we'll resume.
I'm trying to wait.
Since he already terminated you.